purpose of disseminating Buddhist teachings across dialectal or perhaps language lines. So it's a compromise language made up of pieces from different languages in India at the time. The reason I have trouble with lingua franca is usually that means something you can speak. Usually that it can be a marketplace language where people from different linguistic backgrounds can haggle over goods in some common tongue. And that's not what Pali was. It's a scriptural lingua franca. I don't think we really have a word for that. But used originally and only for religious texts. And I mean that broadly, not only for the canonical scriptures attributed to the Buddha, but later for commentaries and for what we might call church histories, texts like the Dipavamsa from the 3rd or 4th century, or the Mahavamsa from the 5th century, composed to tell the history of Buddhism and, of course, the history of Sri Lanka in the process, composed in Sri Lanka much later. So Pali is already representing a bit of a divergence from the language policy we talked about at the beginning. It's no one's language, and ideally everyone's language, at least as a language for the study and recitation of Buddhist texts. There's another rather surprising implication of this, maybe even shocking to some people, and that is that the texts in Pali cannot in any sense be described as the originals. When I say shocking to some people, I mean, again, a lot of my Theravadan friends who consider this the real Buddha Vachana. This is what he said, and it's in the language that he said it. That would be nice. We have no podcasts, alas, from the Buddha. But in terms of a conference devoted to translation, what this means is the texts in Pali are not original teachings in anyone's dialect. They are translations, or at least transpositions into different wording using various Prakrit elements. The word Pali is the subject of a very old misunderstanding, not ours. We inherited it. This is a misunderstanding in medieval Asian traditions. The word doesn't appear in the Pali Tripitaka. It's a commentarial word. It comes from a later layer of Buddhist literature. And when it does appear, it's the phrase that it appears in is Pali Bhasa. Well, you know Bhasha, Subhashita, and so forth. Just the Pali language. So it looks like the name of a language, like the French language, or the Sanskrit language, or the Chinese language. But it's not. Pali, as I think some of you already know, doesn't mean a language name. It means texts. Specifically, it means scriptural religious texts.